Saram students, and welcome back in this session. Today we'll be doing a chapter from Moments, that is chapter 6, Weathering the Storm in Ersama, written by Harsh Mandar. So before we begin, let's read something about the author. Harsh Mandar is an Indian author, columnist, researcher, a teacher and social activist who works with survivors of mass violence and hunger, as well as homeless persons and street children. He is the director of the Center for Equity Studies, a research organization based in New Delhi. He is still the director out there. He also served as Special Commissioner to the Supreme Court of India in the Right to Food campaign and was a member of the National Advisory Council of the Government of India. So, lot of credits. Harsh Mandar has written and co-authored several books and regularly writes columns for newspapers like The Hindu, Hindustan Times and Dainik Bhaskar, and contributes frequently to scholarly journals. Now let's see what awards and laurels he has achieved. He's got the Rajiv Gandhi National Sadbhavna Award for Peace Work, the M.A. Thomas National Human Rights Award in the year 2002, the South Asian Minority Lawyers Harmony Award in the year 2012, the Chishti Harmony Award in the year 2012. So these are the awards that has been given to him for all the work that he has done throughout his lifetime. So now moving ahead, we'll look at this chapter, what the theme of this particular lesson written by Harsh Mandar is. So the theme here is, when a natural calamity like a storm takes place, people are put to a lot of suffering. Apart from the help the government provides, the members of the community should also mobilize themselves to solve their problems. So whenever there is a calamity, a natural calamity like floods or storm, we need to help each other, not just depend on government help. We need to move and help and solve the problems of the community. In the story, we see how a young boy, hardly 19 years old, takes the initiative and helps the members of his community to stand on their feet. His leadership qualities are praised. So it's about a young boy, how he took the initiative and helped the people of his community, how he took care of them when there was an event of, when there was a natural calamity that occurred. So moving ahead, we'll now see who are the main characters in this story. The first character, the important one, is Prashant. He is a 19-year-old boy who lives in a village named Kalikuda in the coastal area of Orissa. And the second character is Prashant's friend. He lives in the coastal town of Orissa called Ersama, which is 18 kilometers from Kalikuda. Okay, so they are the main characters in the story. Now let's begin with the lesson. The cyclone that hit Orissa in October 1999 killed thousands of people and devastated hundreds of villages. For 2 dreadful nights, Prashant, a young man, was marooned on the roof of a house. On the 3rd day, he decided to go to his village. Did he find his family? So this is related to the cyclone, the super cyclone that hit Orissa in the year 1999. So how Prashant, this young man, reached his village and what he did out there. So we'll just read through this lesson. On 27th October 1999, 7 years after his mother's death, Prashant had gone to the block headquarters of Ersama, a small town in coastal Orissa, some 18 kilometers from his village, to spend the day with a friend. So after his mother's death, that is 7 years after his mother's death, he decided to meet his friend who lived in Ersama, that was 18 kilometers from his village named Kalikuda. So he decided to go and meet. In the evening, a dark and menacing storm quickly gathered. Winds beat against the houses with a speed and fury that Prashant had never witnessed before. Heavy and incessant rain filled the darkness. Ancient trees were uprooted and crashed to the earth. So when he was reaching there, he reached out there, he found that in the evening it suddenly grew very dark and there was severe and heavy storm. There was also heavy continuous rain that was pouring in, and he was really wondering what had happened because he had never witnessed such a sight before. And all the trees, the old trees, were getting uprooted, that is, they were falling off to the ground. Screams rent the air as people and houses were swiftly washed away. The angry waters swirled into his friend's house neck deep. The building was of brick and mortar and was strong enough to survive the devastation of the wind's velocity of 350 kilometers per hour. So all around people were screaming, they were shouting out, the houses were being washed away, the waters were getting filled into people's houses. It had gone neck deep in his friend's house too. However, because his building was made of brick and mortar, it could survive all this devastation, that is, this destruction caused due to the wind's velocity. The speed was so high that it couldn't wait. The waters were getting filled in everyone's houses. What happened? But the cold terror of the family grew with the crashing of trees that had got uprooted and fallen on their house sometime in the middle of the night, damaging its roof and walls. However, the trees were getting uprooted and it had fallen on their house. The roof was damaged, the walls were damaged. Everything happened suddenly in the middle of the night. There was total destruction and chaos all around. The crazed destruction wrought by the cyclone and the surge of the ocean continued for next 36 hours, although wind speeds had reduced somewhat by the next morning. To escape the waters rising in the house, Prashant and his friend's family had taken refuge on the roof. Okay, so there was so much of destruction caused, wrought by the cyclone, means the destruction caused due to the cyclone and the increase in the current, the ocean waters rising high. It was continuous for around 36 hours. You can imagine the kind of destruction that must have taken place. The wind, the speed of the wind was very high. However, it began to reduce a little by the next morning. However, to escape this water rising in their house, a friend's house, they decided to take shelter. Refuge means take shelter on the roof. So they decided to go to the roof of their house. Prashant will never forget the shock he experienced at his first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the super cyclone in the grey light of the early morning. So he will never be able to forget this. It was a shocking experience for him because he had never witnessed such a sight earlier. The destruction caused due to the super cyclone and how the conditions were all around, he could never forget, and that too it was during the midnight. Okay, so he was really in a very shocking condition. A raging, deadly brown sheet of water covered everything as far as the eyes could see. Only fractured cement houses still stood in a few places. Bloated animal carcasses and human corpses floated in every direction. So a raging means very heavy, deadly brown sheet of water. Muddy water spread out everywhere, okay, till as far as the eyes could see. Fractured cement houses means all broken cement houses were all around the place. Okay, lot of houses were washed away. Bloated animal carcasses, the dead bodies of animals, they were floating in the water. The human corpses again means the dead bodies of humans, people who had lost their lives. Animals and people all around, they floated in the water. So it was a very dangerous sight to see. All around, even huge old trees had fallen. 2 coconut trees had fallen on the roof of their house. This was a blessing in disguise because the tender coconuts from the trees kept the trapped family from starving in the several days that followed. So on their roof, that is his friend's roof, the coconut trees had fallen off. However, because they were on the rooftop to get protection from the rising water levels, they were able to feed themselves on these tender coconuts that was available to them. So they say it was a blessing in disguise. So they were not starving. So several days they had to spend out here. So much was the destruction that had been caused because of the super cyclone. For the next 2 days, Prashant sat huddled with his friend's family in the open on the rooftop. They froze in the cold and incessant rain. The rainwater washed away Prashant's tears. So for almost next 2 days, they were up there on the rooftop. They were freezing because of the cold and the continuous rain that was happening out there. And almost it had washed away his tears, Prashant's tears, because he was out there scared and tensed because he'd seen such a sight. However, the rains that were pouring in continuously washed away his tears. We'll continue again. The only thought that flashed through his mind was whether his family had survived the fury of the super cyclone. Was he to be bereaved once again? So now when he was out there, he had only this one thought that came to his mind, that whether his family out there in his village, whether they had survived this fury. They were what to say, they were surviving out there, they were safe out there in spite of this cyclone. So he was really worried whether he had to take this tension again, whether he had to move out there or not. Lot of things coming into his mind. 2 days later, which seemed to Prashant like 2 years, the rain ceased and the rain waters slowly began to recede. Prashant was determined to seek out his family without further delay. So these 2 days later, he felt like 2 years. He was out there somewhere in some isolated place. The rain ceased, means the rains came down and the rain waters began to recede. It was receding. The water was moving out slowly. So he now was very much determined to seek out whether his family was safe or not. So he wanted to move to his family. But the situation was still dangerous, and his friend's family pleaded with Prashant to stay back a little while longer. But Prashant knew he had to go. So, because the situation was still dangerous, everything was not normalized yet, the water was just receding, his friend's family, they pleaded that he stay back for some more time so that the things get normalized. But however, Prashant knew that he had to go. He decided that he had to go to look out for his family. He equipped himself with a long sturdy stick and then started on his 18-kilometer expedition back to his village through the swollen flood waters. It was a journey he would never forget. So he had decided that he would go back to his village because he was really worried about his family. So he took a long sturdy stick and started moving towards his village. He was on an expedition of 18 kilometers. He was going back to his village through the swollen flood waters, that heavy rains which had caused lot of floods all around. So he decided that he would walk through and reach his village. So it was a journey that he would never forget. A 19-year-old boy moving out to look out for his family. See the determination. He constantly had to use his stick to locate the road, to determine where the water was most shallow. At places it was waist deep and progress was slow. At several points he lost the road and had to swim. So he was constantly hitting down to check whether the road exists or not, because it was totally covered with water, filled with water, and certain places it was waist deep, and so he had to move really slow. And at several points the road was not visible at all, so he had to swim through that path. So this was a journey he would never forget. After some time, after some distance, he was relieved to find two friends of his uncle who were also returning to their village. They decided to move ahead together. So when he traveled some distance, he was relieved to see two friends of his uncle. They were also returning to their village. So he had got some company now. So they decided to move ahead together. So all the three of them started moving towards the village together. As they waded through the waters, the scenes they witnessed grew more and more macabre. They had to push away many human bodies, men, women, children, and carcasses of dogs, goats, and cattle that the current swept against them as they moved ahead. So, as they were moving, the scenes were very dangerous, very deadly, because they had to push lot of human bodies. People had lost their lives. There were men, women, children, all human bodies floating on the water. It was very dangerous sight to see, but they had to push through them and move ahead. The carcasses of dogs, carcasses again, bodies of dogs, goats, cattle, which was swept because of the current produced by the water, the ocean current and the cyclonic storm. So they had to move through them, push them aside and wade through the waters. They had to move through the waters, pushing all this. So the sight was really dangerous and very scary. In every village that they passed, they could barely see a house standing. Prashant now wept out loud and long. He was sure that his family could not have survived this catastrophe. So, as they passed through the villages, different villages on their way, the journey was almost 18 kilometers. So, the villages that they passed through, they could hardly see any house there. Everything had been washed away because of this cyclone. So he started weeping. He was crying out loud because he felt that his family would have surely not survived this catastrophe, means this natural calamity. So he felt that he must have lost his family because it was really dangerous. The super cyclone was really devastating and destructive. Eventually, Prashant reached his village, Kalikuda. His heart went cold. Where their home once stood, there were only remnants of its roof. Some of their belongings were caught, mangled, and twisted in the branches of trees just visible above the dark waters. So finally he reached his village, that is Kalikuda. He was going cold. His heart was going cold, means he was really scared. He was freezing from within whether he would find his family or not. When he saw the sight around, he saw there was no houses, all remnants of its roofs. There were remains. The remains of the roof were scattered everywhere. Most of the belongings were caught and mangled in the branches of the trees. Okay, the branches, the trees had been uprooted. Everything was scattered all around the place. There was total destruction. So he was really worried. He was scared to see this sight. He could see all this and there was dark water. It is muddy water everywhere. So he was wondering whether he could find his family or not. So he really went cold. His heart went cold. Young Prashant decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So now there is this Red Cross Society, the shelter home, which takes care of all these people who are affected by these kind of natural calamities. So Prashant now decided to go to the Red Cross shelter to look for his family. So he felt he would go and inquire about his family at this Red Cross shelter. Now, whether he found his family, what happened to his family, what he did next, we would learn in the next class. Till then, go through the lesson, revise it, understand what you have learned, and we will continue in the next class.